Imagine explaining the entire economy of the world in just 14 minutes. Why do prices rise? Why do some countries become rich while others stay poor? And how does money actually work? From trade and markets to banks and inflation, economics explains how the world runs. In this video, we'll break down the most important ideas in economics quickly and simply. Let's begin. Economics begins with one simple truth: resources are limited, but human wants are unlimited. Because of this, every person, business, and government must constantly make choices. And every choice means giving something else up. Trade people quickly realized something important. Instead of doing everything themselves, they could specialize in what they do best and trade for everything else. Trade allows both sides to become better off. And this simple idea powers the entire global economy. Opportunity cost of choice has a hidden cost. If you spend money on a phone, you can't spend that money on something else. The real cost of a decision is the next best thing you gave up. Economists call this opportunity cost. Comparative advantage. Even if one country is better at producing everything, trade can still benefit everyone. This happens because of comparative advantage. Each country focuses on producing what it is relatively better at, then trades with others. This makes the entire world economy more efficient. A market is simply a system where buyers and sellers interact. It could be a physical market or a global online platform. Markets help coordinate millions of decisions every day without central planning. Incentivation behavior is strongly influenced by incentives. Lower prices encourage more buying. Higher wages attract more workers. Taxes, subsidies, and rewards all shape how people behave in the economy. Supply and demand. Prices in a market are determined by two powerful forces: supply, how much producers are willing to sell; demand, how much consumers want to buy. When supply and demand interact, prices naturally adjust. Equilibrium. Price and price control. The point where supply equals demand is called the equilibrium price. At this price, the market is balanced. But sometimes governments intervene with price controls, such as price ceilings or price floors. These policies can sometimes create shortages or surpluses. Monetary trade relied on barter, exchanging goods directly. But barter had a major problem. Both people needed to want exactly what the other had. Money solved this problem by becoming a universal medium of exchange. Money makes trade faster, easier, and more efficient. Banks play a critical role in the economy. They store people's money and lend it to businesses and individuals. This allows investments, entrepreneurship, and economic growth. But banking also introduces financial risks if not properly managed. Markets are everywhere, not just for goods like food or phones. There are also markets for labor, capital, land, and financial assets. Together, these markets coordinate the entire economy. Supply chain. Every product is a complex supply chain. Raw materials are extracted, transported, manufactured, and delivered to consumers. Modern supply chains often stretch across multiple countries. Production is the process of turning inputs into valuable outputs. Economists usually describe four main factors of production: land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. They create the goods and services people consume. Productivity measures how efficiently goods and services are produced. When productivity increases, economies grow faster. Higher productivity usually leads to higher wages and better living standards. GDP, gross domestic product. GDP stands for gross domestic product. It measures the total value of all goods and services produced in a country over a certain period of time. GDP is one of the most important indicators used to measure economic performance. Economists and governments use GDP to understand how well an economy is doing. But GDP alone doesn't tell the whole story, because large countries may produce more simply due to having more people. To understand living standards better, economists often look at GDP per person. Economic growth happens when a country produces more goods and services over time. Growth usually comes from better technology, higher productivity, more skilled workers, investment in capital. When economies grow, living standards improve. Boom, recession, and depression. Economies move in cycles. A boom means strong economic growth. A recession is when the economy slows down. A depression is a deep and long economic collapse. One famous example was the Great Depression. Inflation and stagflation. Inflation means prices rise over time. Moderate inflation is normal in growing economies, but stagflation is dangerous. It happens when prices rise, economic growth slows, unemployment increases, all at the same time. Why prices so high? Prices rise when demand increases, supply decreases, production becomes expensive, supply chain problems, wars, and energy shortages can all raise prices. Price discrimination: businesses sometimes charge different prices to different people. This is called price discrimination. Examples include student discounts, airline ticket pricing, streaming subscriptions. History of money: money has evolved throughout history. Early humans used barter systems. Later came commodity money like gold and silver. Today, most money is digital currency stored in banks. How much money should exist? If too little money exists, economies slow down. If too much money exists, inflation increases. Managing money supply is one of the biggest challenges for governments. Monetary expansion: governments and central banks can increase the money supply. This is called monetary expansion. It helps stimulate economic activity during recessions. Hyperinflation: when too much money is printed, inflation can spiral out of control. This is called hyperinflation. A famous example happened in Weimar, Germany. People needed wheelbarrows of money just to buy bread. Central banks: most countries have a central bank. Examples include the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank. Central banks control money supply, interest rates, financial stability. Interest rates determine the cost of borrowing money. Lower rates encourage spending, investment, economic growth. Higher rates slow the economy and reduce inflation. Monetary policy is how central banks manage the economy using interest rates. Money supply: it is one of the most powerful economic tools. Quantitative easing: during major crises, central banks may use quantitative easing. This means creating new money to buy government bonds and financial assets. This increases liquidity in the financial system. Loans equals new money: when banks give loans, they actually create new money. This happens because banks lend out deposits multiple times. Fractional reserve banking: this system is called fractional reserve banking. Banks keep only a fraction of deposits in reserve and lend out the rest. This expands the money supply and supports economic growth. Bank run and deposit insurance: if many customers withdraw money at the same time, banks can collapse. This is called a bank run. To prevent this, governments created deposit insurance systems. For example, in the United States, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation protects deposits. Taxes: governments collect taxes to fund public services. Taxes support things like infrastructure, education, healthcare, defense. Types of taxes: common taxes include income tax, sales tax, corporate tax, property tax. Each country structures taxes differently. Public goods: some services benefit everyone but cannot easily be sold privately. Economists call these public goods. Examples include roads, public safety, national defense budget, deficit and surplus. A government budget compares spending, tax revenue. If spending is higher, it creates a deficit. If revenue is higher, it creates a surplus. Government bonds: to cover deficits, governments borrow money by issuing government bonds. Investors lend money to governments and receive interest over time. National debt: when governments keep borrowing over time, debt accumulates. This is called national debt. Some countries owe trillions of dollars. Debt isn't always bad, but too much can slow growth and create risk. Debt servicing and default: governments must pay interest on their debt. This is called debt servicing. If a country cannot repay its debt, it may default. Defaults can cause financial crises and damage trust in the economy. International trade: countries trade goods and services across borders. Trade allows nations to specialize and increase efficiency. This leads to greater global wealth. Free trade means fewer restrictions between countries. It allows goods to move freely across borders. Supporters say it increases efficiency. Critics say it can harm local industries. Globalization and structural adjustment: globalization connects economies worldwide. Goods, money, and ideas move across borders faster than ever. Some developing countries go through structural adjustments to modernize their economies. Protectionism: sometimes protect domestic industries. They use tools like tariffs, taxes on imports, quotas, limits on imports, subsidies, financial support, embargoes, trade bans. This is called protectionism. Currency: every country has its own currency. Examples include the United States dollar and euro. Currencies are used for trade and store value. Forex and exchange rate: currencies are traded in global markets called forex. An exchange rate shows how much one currency is worth compared to another. These rates change constantly. Floating versus fixed currencies can be floating, value determined by markets, fixed, value controlled by governments. Most modern currencies are floating. Currency depreciation and appreciation change value over time. Depreciation, value decreases, appreciation, value increases. These changes affect trade and price. Currency manipulation. Some governments try to influence currency value. This is called currency manipulation. It can make exports cheaper and boost trade. Currency crisis. When a currency rapidly loses value, it causes a currency crisis. This can lead to inflation, instability, and economic collapse. Global supply chain. Products are rarely made in one place. A global supply chain involves many countries working together. Example, raw materials, manufacturing, shipping, retail. Supply shock. A supply shock happens when production is suddenly disrupted. Examples, natural disasters, wars, pandemics. This often leads to higher prices. Labor economics. Labor economics studies workers, jobs, and wages. It explains how people earn income and how businesses hire workers. Wages are determined by skills demand. Productivity. Higher skills usually lead to higher pay. Marginal revenue. Product workers are paid based on the value they create. This is called marginal revenue product. If a worker generates more value, they earn higher wages. Unemployment occurs when people want jobs but cannot find them. Types include frictional, structural, cyclical. Unemployment signals economic problems. Minimum wage. Governments sometimes set a minimum wage. This is the lowest legal pay for workers. It helps protect workers but can also affect hiring. Wage gap. Not all workers earn the same income. Differences in pay are called the wage gap. These gaps can exist due to skills, education, experience, economic structures. Finance is the system of managing money, investments, and assets. It connects savers, investors, and businesses. Finance helps move money to where it can be used most efficiently. Stocks represent ownership in a company. When you buy a stock, you own a small part of that business. The efficient market hypothesis suggests that all available information is already reflected in stock prices, meaning consistently beating the market is very difficult. Bonds are loans made to governments or companies. Derivatives are financial contracts based on other assets. And cryptocurrencies are digital assets like Bitcoin. Each comes with different levels of risk and reward. Investing means putting money into assets to grow wealth, but higher returns usually come with higher risk. This is called the risk-return trade-off. Smart investors balance risk and reward. This field studies how countries grow and improve living standards. Why are some nations wealthy while others struggle? Development economics tries to answer that. A poverty trap happens when people cannot escape poverty. Low income, low education, low opportunity, low income again. Breaking this cycle is one of the biggest global challenges. Solutions include foreign aid, microloans, education, infrastructure investment. These aim to help economies grow and reduce poverty. Traditional economics assumes humans are rational, but in reality, people often make irrational decisions. Behavioral economics studies these patterns. Humans are influenced by cognitive biases. Examples include loss aversion, overconfidence, herd behavior. These biases affect financial decisions. A nudge is a small change that influences behavior. For example, automatic savings plans, default options. These can improve decision-making without forcing choices. Different countries organize their economies differently. Main systems include capitalism, market-driven socialism, government involvement, communism, state control. Each has strengths and weaknesses. Most modern countries use a mixed economy. This combines free markets, government regulation, balancing efficiency and fairness. Economics is the study of how we use limited resources. It explains how prices are set, how money works, how economies grow, why inequality exists. From individuals to governments, economics shapes. If you understood even half of this, you now know more economics than most people. So if this video helped you, support the channel with a like and a comment, because here we turn complex ideas into simple knowledge. And remember, fuel your brain in minutes.